Hello everyone, I welcome you to another video by Legacy IAS where we are going to look east. We're going to look east at India's eastern side, particularly the Southeast Asian region, and what is so special about this region, what has been our outlook towards that region, and what are we trying to achieve in this particular region. All of this and much more in this particular video. So we are talking of this particular region of Southeast Asia, which is a grouping of countries whereby these countries have gotten together because of political, economic, and socio-cultural reasons into an organization called ASEAN, which is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Okay, these nations, as far as in comparison or in relation to India is concerned, we need to kind of understand that this kind of an outlook or our look east policy, the entire discussion that we are having today as to how India is looking towards its east and now it's acting towards its east. So how are we doing that? What is the evolution of that particular policy? So this discussion starts from way back in the pre-1989 period, the period when we had the Soviet Union. The world was divided into two blocks of the first and the second world, led by United States of America and USSR respectively. So here we basically saw a world where either you were a supporter of capitalism or socialism. Now in this particular period, India and these Southeast Asian nations were on opposing sides. Why? Because during this Cold War period, we were kind of tilted towards United States of USSR, and we were not really so much in favor of capitalism during this particular period. So moreover, as far as the physical connect was concerned, we were kind of limited through Myanmar. At that particular point of time in pre-1989 period, Myanmar had a lot of policies which kind of isolated the world. It kind of had policies which really would keep India away, or India and Myanmar would not have very good relations. And in terms of acting as a gateway through Myanmar, it would be very, very problematic. Moreover, Bangladesh basically had refused to provide transit facilities through its territories all the way to Southeast Asia. So we were kind of having both ideological as well as physical barriers to our connect with these Southeast Asian regions. Now, as far as the colonial history was concerned, now India, kind of had a very different kind of orientation as far as the western side is concerned. Okay, even though we tried to kind of follow a lot of policies and principles in our post-independence period through the British form of governance, we kind of also were tilted towards USSR. Now, in this particular period, because of all of these reasons, we also were not very much interested in the Southeast Asia. We also did not have a lot of access to this particular region. Now, our absence in this particular region gave China all the more an advantage as to how they can have influence in this particular Southeast Asian region. Now, this particular interaction began with China's open door policy in 1979. And that's when it began its expansionist tendencies, large parts of which you see in its fight with the Southeast Asian nations today. When the Soviet Union or USSR disintegrated, okay, this was also the time when India underwent a huge economic crisis and was kind of forced to move to the LPG reforms of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. So India kind of replaced its policy in the economic domain with a much more liberalized economy. It opened up its trade and began expanding into the regional markets, including the Southeast Asian nations. So in that sense, our domestic situation also changed much after the 1989 period, which also made us look towards our east. Moreover, under the Prime Ministership of Narasimha Rao, India actually began looking towards South Asia and also Southeast Asia in its entire discussion of foreign policy. Now, how has this Look East policy evolved? What is this policy all about? So, this first phase, which began in 1991, was the time when there were a lot of centers in Asia which were focusing largely on economic matters, particularly the amount of trade and investment linkages you can develop with each other. The second phase, which started roughly from about 2003, kind of covered the areas of Australia as well as East Asia, whereas the Asian region was its center. But if you look today at this current move of Look East policy, we've moved from narrow outlook of only economic matters relating to trade to wider, much more wider economic, social security cooperation, political partnerships, physical connectivity, which we're trying to establish through multiple infrastructure projects of rail and road links. So we are kind of expanding and broadening our areas of cooperation and mutual interest. So now, as far as this particular Look East policy is concerned, it has a lot of potential in terms of how India and its relations with the nations of ASEAN are kind of can work together and have a good future ahead. Particularly, what requires reference is to the kind of importance that it has for India's northeastern region. So now when we look at the northeastern region, we really need a comprehensive strategy of connectivity. A comprehensive connectivity strategy is needed for the region, particularly how connectivity can be enhanced within the Northeast, so intra-Northeastern region, improving connectivity between Northeast and the rest of India, and also how you can have cross-border transport as well as communication with the neighboring states. Now, the areas of the northeastern regions have a lot of connect with, in fact, share a lot of border with other regions, especially the Southeast Asian nations. So, connectivity is one kind of area which can encompass both interconnectivity both within the northeastern region as well as the other states of India, as well as when we look kind of outside with other countries of the world, what kind of connectivity are we essentially looking at? Now, it's not just the East that is going to be benefiting. All of this is going to depend a lot on our relations with Myanmar. So India's Look East policy involves Myanmar because this is the only Southeast Asian country basically which shares a border with India and is basically seen as a gateway to Southeast Asia. So we cannot ignore geography. So geography kind of gives a particular region a strategic, a politically economic, politically important region. Okay, and it automatically, without any credit of its own, because of how you are there geographically placed, you kind of become important. It's as simple as that. So in that sense, Myanmar's important kind of stems from acting as the link between India as well as Southeast Asia. So in that sense, India is working with Myanmar on several industrial as well as infrastructure projects, including the construction of highways, pipelines, and ports. So now, before India's Look East policy, it was China who previously had enjoyed a monopoly over Myanmar, particularly its oil and natural gas reserves. China, however, still continues to be the largest weapon supplier to Myanmar. But of course, India has also over the years kind of enhanced its military cooperation, its defense mechanisms, border controls with Myanmar ever since we've adopted our Look East policy, to the extent that we provide a lot of capacity building. So this is a kind of difference that India and China have towards the developmental strategies with other countries. So whereas India tries to focus on empowerment, on capacity building, China focuses upon trade, China focuses upon give and take. So in that sense, India has provided Myanmar and the armed forces of Myanmar a lot of capacities and also knowledge sharing, and shares the intelligence as to how they can combat insurgents in the northeastern region. So they are also making Myanmar partners in the growth, development, and stability of the northeastern region, which is also very, very commendable in terms of the approach through which we can engage Myanmar in the northeastern region. Now, the ever increasing importance that the Southeast Asian region has for India, it kind of made us move from a position of just looking east, but also proactively moving towards it. So in that sense, in 2014, Prime Minister Modi visited Myanmar and attended the first India-ASEAN Summit and the 18-nation East Asia Summit. That is where he transformed this looking east policy to a very proactive acting east policy. It also stems from the fact that you're trying to bring about a change, trying to capitalize upon the opportunities, and also kind of minimize the potential threats that can come from a country like China in the Southeast Asian region. So a neighborhood that's so close to you, it's very important to have those kind of strong relations, and the present government kind of works towards good relations with its neighbors and neighborhood. So Southeast Asia kind of comes in that extended neighborhood to an extent, and in that sense, the relationship of India with these nations of ASEAN is very core to its relationship with the ASEAN nations. Now, the Act East policy is basically an effort to kind of increase and bolster the strategic as well as the economic ties with the Southeast Asian countries. And this, hopefully, especially after the COVID-19 and the disruption of supply chains, was seen as a way to kind of counter-influence the effect that China has on this particular region. How does the future of this particular region look at us? So now when we're looking at a population of 600 million and nominal GDP of $2.3 billion or $2.3 trillion, we're looking at ASEAN being a very important economic force to reckon with in Asia and a driver of global wealth. Alright, so when we are looking at such a big organization, of course, the importance cannot be underlined further, but it only goes on to say that we need to create opportunities for finding ways of convergences so that we can work together. So we are, also looking at the world kind of shifting its trajectory, particularly United States of America kind of shifting its focus all the way to Asia, and in this regard, Southeast Asia and this region becomes very, very important for investment, for other linkages that have to be established. So this particular discussion is extremely important for you to have a good understanding of India's foreign policy, but also as a very important UPSC aspirant, you need to have clarity in this particular area. So do you also agree with me that we need to look east? If that is the case, then let me know by liking the video. You can also subscribe to Legacy IAS videos for more such content, and also share it with those who are not aware of the importance of looking east.